was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the Kaliningrad.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys? Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the latest, not the last. We're not finishing. The latest edition of Global Atheist News Review. This is where we have a panel of opinionated people, and tonight's panel consists of. Come on, do something, computer. Yes, Guy Otten in Manchester. Dread Pyrate in British Columbia. Tersia du Plessis, also in the UK at the moment, on holiday. And Frank Lovell, who is in Kentucky. Thanks for coming, guys. Let me see if I can get us all on screen. Yeah, look at that. Pretty damn good, eh? So, straight into it then. This is a show it's not about, idle chat about the weather in your part of the world. This is serious stuff about actual issues, items of news that are going on around the world and our reaction to them. Starting with the first item, the Taliban. They've been out of the news a bit lately, but they've come back in because they've had a clash with the Iranian border guards on the frontier between the two countries. And they claim that one of their fighters was killed in the area between Nimroz province in Afghanistan and Hermand area in Iran. So guess what? Each country blamed the other one for the incident. And this is the latest in a series of these events that have been going on. For example, last month, Iran reported the death of one of its guards in the same area. So the exact circumstances of this skirmish are unclear, but one Iranian report says shooting started when Taliban forces tried to raise their flag on non-Afghan territory. Obviously, the border's a bit blurred. So what have you got to say about that, guys?
Well, I'd like to say that it's good to see two of our terrorist sources fighting with each other instead of working towards us.
Yes. Yes, blue on blue, eh?
I'd like them to expend that kind of energy elsewhere rather than here or in Great Britain.
Yeah, yeah. Who knows? They might wipe each other out.
Well, I mean, they're not likely to do that. But I mean, obviously, all border disputes can be mediated. And what they need to do is have a mediation, an international mediation, to define exactly where the border is and to also sort out how they work together around that border. That's that's the boring common sense answer.
Yeah, that's far too sensible.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah,
I'm not sure how willing they are to work with mediators like the UN. We might have a situation a bit like the Irish border dispute that's been going on, how many, 30 years? More, 50 years probably. Tersia, do you have any border disputes in South Africa?
I'm very peaceful and we don't have any border issues, but it's interesting that talking about border issues, we could have, well, hopefully not, but it could be a potential situation like similar to two Orthodox countries being at war with one another or having skirmishes. So here you have two Islamic groups, although the Taliban is not exactly representative of a country, it's more a, but it could be two groups who adhere to the same religion, and despite the fact that they adhere to the same religion, they still have major conflict.
Yes, of course, because there is actually a major religious difference between Afghanistan and Iran, namely Shia versus Sunni.
Yeah.
I'm glad. I was going to ask. I didn't know which one. So is the Taliban Shia and Iran Sunni?
No. Taliban are Sunni, and the Iranians are Shia.
And
There's
they
not a lot of love lost between them.
No.
And the Taliban spend their time oppressing their Shia minority in Afghanistan. I think is it the Hazaras? I think they're the Shias. Yeah.
And there was a lot of contention in Iraq, wasn't there, when they were ruled by the minority Sunni under the tyrant whose name escapes me.
Saddam Hussein.
That's the one. Yeah, that is the one. Yeah. So the Shia majority were ruled by the Sunnis, and it was only the strong arm of Saddam Hussein who managed to keep control of it. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, moving on then. This is West Africa, not South Africa. I know your ears prick up when you hear South Africa. West Africa. This is Mali. It's in the Sahel. And news takes a while to come out from those parts of the world. They're not that well connected, but 132 civilians were murdered by members of Makina Kabata. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. It's an Al-Qaeda affiliated extremist rebel group led by Fulani preacher Amadou Kufa. Do you know anything about that?
No, it's been going on a long time, this insurgency, but we don't get very many details for some reason, mainly because it's not a Commonwealth country. So we, in England, perhaps they don't pay much attention to what's going on in the sort of francophone areas.
Yeah, we're dealing with that in a minute, actually. But it might just be because it's a bloody desert.
Yeah.
Takes a long while for news to travel.
I mean, it is a timely reminder that Islamic extremism hasn't gone away by any means, and it's still a big issue that we have to confront.
Yeah. Well, what they've been doing is burning huts, houses, and stealing cattle. And very often they have an AK-47 and a motorcycle, so they can turn up, blast away, zoom off. Very difficult to catch them.
Africa is becoming a hotspot of Islamic extremism as we speak, because although it's not a news item, in Mozambique the situation is quite dire as well, with things like this happening. And Mozambique is right on the border of my own country. In fact, the South African Defence Force is out there trying to maintain order in the north of Mozambique. So anybody who thinks that something that happens up there in Mali has no impact on the rest of the world, just think again, maybe.
Well, as for the Francophile element of it, President Emmanuel Macron has been visiting West Africa recently. He went to Guinea-Bissau and had a press conference with the president there. And he's pledged to continue to back West African states in their battle against terrorism, against jihadists who have destabilized several West African states for many years. So they've got the French on their side. Not sure what that's worth.
Well, I think the French do have troops out there, don't they? Or they did have troops. They had, their legions out there.
They did, yes. Well, he said, Macron has said that France has always respected the position of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, in regional matters, because it's facing a wave of coup and jihadist insurgencies, and he claims that France will act in the service of legitimate sovereign states and this regional organization, as we believe our role is to help. So there you go. Watch this space. Okay, Pope Francis. Now, he was flying home from his trip to Canada, where he has done a lot of long days and a lot of traveling, mostly in a wheelchair because he's got bad knees. And so he hosted a press conference on the flight, and he explained that the time may soon come when he needs to consider stepping down. And he'd do that if he felt his health meant that he couldn't serve in the way that he should. So he stressed that he'll be guided by God as to when to step down, if he steps down at all. Because it's not a catastrophe to change a pope. It's not a taboo. Well, up until the last pope, it had never happened. The last pope, Benedict XVI, was the first to ever resign alive. The others were taken from their post to their maker in the sky.
Do they do popes step up or do they step down?
And how can you do that with bad knees?
I think it's got to be ascend, surely, hasn't it?
Oh, so
Ascend,
it's not
yes.
step up.
Maybe
He's got to grow his hair out for the rapture, you know.
yeah, but I mean, if he retires, we'll have 2 Pope Emeriti, as it
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Ex-popes.
Interesting.
And the next Pope might even be a South American as well, or an African or something like that. That'll be interesting.
I wonder who is. Does anybody know who might be next in line?
No, that's a mystery, isn't it? A darkly kept mystery.
Yeah.
No, I don't think they've got somebody sort of in line, have they? They don't. You know, they meet together, about 120 or 150 of them, and they actually elect somebody.
Yes, they do. Yes, but it's a contest, isn't it? It's not an anointing. There's usually 2 or 3, I don't know how many, for them to select between.
But I'm sure there's no politics involved. I'm sure it's all very orderly and spirit inspired. I'm sure
That's
it's
right.
it's not a human thing.
Yeah.
Right, I agree. I mean, there are conservatives and there are liberal-minded.
Liberal?
Difficult. Yeah.
Do you think the popes are liberal, Frank?
No. Oh no.
It's not out of the question, but it's a big question that I can't answer.
I think the conservatives are likely to be in charge, but I think they often choose somebody they think might unify or keep the unity of the church, don't they?
And then of course they've got to stoke up
They have to keep their audience engaged, that's for sure.
Yeah.
What they don't want is somebody with a bad reputation, like most of their priests have.
So there are elements in the Catholic Church that think that priests should be allowed to marry. So you could say that there's an example of a liberal position that could meet with resistance.
Yeah, I think that's a rule that will have to change, because certainly in the West, well, in England, the number of Catholic priests is dwindling apparently, and that's probably one way of addressing that issue.
And there's other reasons too. If I were a Catholic and I was having marital problems, I wouldn't look to my priest as being a source of experience and wisdom.
Yeah, there you go. Well, what can you say?
Now,
you'll be pleased to hear that Ted Haggard is back in the news. I flagged this up a bit last week because the news was just breaking after I edited the Global Atheist News show. And you may remember that way back in 2006, Ted Haggard was probably the most powerful evangelical mega church pastor in the USA at the time. And he was very anti-homosexual. He used to have rants from his pulpit or striding up and down his stage, whatever he did, and they were extremely homophobic. Then he was caught in flagrante delicto with a male prostitute and in the middle of using methamphetamine.
You imagine that?
Yeah, who'd have guessed, eh? Who'd have thunk?
Anyway, he managed to recover from that scandal, and he founded a new church, also in Colorado. They seem to be suckers for this sort of church in Colorado. And he founded that one in 2010. Now, here we are, 2022, and he's at it again. He's being caught resigning as a result of a scandal involving a Denver male prostitute again. And he was ostensibly paying for massages. And later it emerged that he had an inappropriate relationship with a young man at the mega church that he founded.
So if he had an appropriate relationship, would that have been all right? That's my first question. And then secondly, I hope he paid his dues and that he at least got his money's worth. Because, I mean, why can't he have a little bit of fun too?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's right. I mean, it's almost a rule of thumb that when you hear of somebody who is so anti, who's so homophobic, and preaches against it, that next minute they'll be found in this sort of situation. So why doesn't he start a church that is gay friendly or join one?
Don't give him any ideas.
It's funny, like the saying goes, anytime you point a finger, you've got three others pointing back at yourself, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm sure that we're all praying for his redemption or something.
May he be touched by the noodly appendage.
Would that be pasta massage?
That's it. That's right. There we go.
Now, Frank, you had something that you messaged me about because.
It was just a quote that I read just moments getting ready for this meeting.
Yeah.
I didn't know whether it was something you'd be interested in reading or not. I didn't print it out, so I don't possess it.
Okay, so I can read it to you. This is what you sent me. Haggard is one in a long line of powerful evangelical leaders accused of sexual misconduct. Recently, those have included Bill Hybels, formerly of Willow Creek Community Church, Carl Lentz, formerly of Hillsong, New York City, I guess that is, the Manhattan branch, of the global megachurch, and the late Ravi Zacharias, who founded the Ravi Zacharias International Ministries. And it finishes with this enigmatic sentence: Haggard could not be reached for comment.
Something that I find odd, I know that the Ravi Zacharias scandal also involved a massage parlor.
Yes.
So maybe evangelical pastors should just openly start to run massage parlors, and it would stop the scandals,
And maybe they're the ones that are eating babies in the basement of a pizzeria. Like, we've been focused on the wrong people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I mean, all that will happen is that he will repent publicly and take on board his need for repentance and change, and it'll all and he'll go through a process, and then he'll found another church, and it'll all cycle to start again.
Probably, yeah. Ravi Zacharias, in fact, has a sort of remote connection to me, because I have I'm not quite sure how to describe it, an ongoing correspondence with one of his underlings, who, am I going to be able to remember his name now? He's a British evangelical what's his name? I'll have to look it up. But he worked under Ravi for some years. He emigrated to Toronto, I think. That's where they were based at the time. And then he came back to this country and operates a church based in Scotland. And I actually debated him in St Andrews University a couple of years ago. And this debate can be seen in the archives on the channel. So by a sort of it's 150 different links of connection, isn't it? But that was only 3.
Well, if you get a chance to chat with him again, you'll have a new topic to discuss. Given the developments that was he. How shall I say it? A student of, or just a buddy of, what that fellow's?
Zacharias.
Yeah. I just wonder what their relationship was.
Well, employer and employee.
Okay. Well, you got something interesting to speak with him about.
I think he's clammed up. I don't think he talks about it anymore.
There's still a ministry to run.
Yeah. But I think that's a period of his life he'd probably prefer to forget. I'll have to look up his name in a minute. So we move on now to the controversial Church of Scientology, which, of course, is associated with celebrities like Tom Cruise and John Travolta, and Tom Cruise's former lady friend who has come to her senses and left. But they used to be happy to talk about their association with Scientology on camera and in front of microphones, and suddenly they don't. Tom Cruise has recently been the star of the latest Top Gun sequel. He's created, his name has created $1 billion at the global box office for this acclaimed action blockbuster, but he didn't mention Scientology, unusually for him. He's kept quiet about that, although the original appeal of Scientology, according to L. Ron Hubbard, is that Scientology teaches that the world is under attack by evil forces, and all that stops them is one good man who's not going to let petty rules get in his way. So that is the model that
sounds like Trump.
Well, it's the model that Cruise has been following in his hero movies, isn't it?
Right.
Action hero movies. But now he's suddenly decided not to plug his association with Scientology, but rather to fail to mention it. I wonder why.
That's a good question. Now, you know, most of the Americans I know are like me in that we really like his acting. I think he's terrific, but we don't like him.
Yes.
And, you know, and Scientology is part of it. Scientology, the theology of Scientology is as goofy as the theology of Mormonism. I mean, it's, if you dig into it, look it up and read about what really is at the root. What they claim is they're initiating origins, galaxies far, far away and all of that.
Yeah.
It's just outrageous.
Well, Tersia and I interviewed a guest on the subject of Scientology, didn't we, Tersia?
Yep. And I was wondering whether all the publicity, bad publicity, and podcasts and YouTube channels exposing some of the really, really bad things that Scientology has done over the years. I wonder if that's contributing to Tom Cruise not saying anything about it.
Absolutely, yeah. I think highly likely, I think.
Well, let's hope. Let's hope it's the beginning of his journey out of that.
They've had so much bad publicity. They've had accusations of forced labor, profiting, human trafficking, pyramid scheme, all these sorts of accusations. So hopefully their reputation is now poo.
Now, the only reason they've not been inundated by lawsuits is they have so much money, you know, that they can fight those lawsuits with. It's hard to find lawyers that will go up against them. But that could be changing.
Yeah. That being said, I should, you know, just like I did on our earlier shows, is like when you apply the outsider test of faith to any religion, all the claims are absolutely ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, picking on Scientology is just picking on one of the many, you know.
Yeah, you're right.
You know, fiction is fiction, and, you know, you can class them into whatever genre you wish, but they strictly are fictions. And, you know, to a Scientologist, Christianity is ridiculous. To a Christian, the other, you know, the same, and same with Pastafarians. They think we're just all bonkers. But you know, sometimes you just have to ask a question, right?
You could even break that down within a faith between the denominations, couldn't you?
Yeah.
So I found who it was I debated at St Andrews University back in whenever this was. I can't find the date, but it was about Christmas 2 years ago, sometime like that. And it was Dr. Andy Bannister, who was, I think at that time, he just stopped being an employee of the Ravi Zakaria.
I'm quite familiar. I've listened to a number of debates on Unbelievable with Andy Bannister.
He now leads, I think it's called SOLAS organization.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. He's a Scotsman.
I don't know how Scottish he is. Probably not a true one.
Not a true Scotsman. Yeah, I like it.
I will put the link in the details underneath this video to that debate, so that if you're interested, you can find out more about him. We at one stage we were exchanging email updates and everything, but since the Ravi Zacharias scandal, he's sort of calmed down a bit. I think he's an interesting guy because, as a rabid Christian, I mean, he was raised in some fairly fundamentalist sect, and then he studied theology, but he did a PhD in Islam because he wanted to work out how to combat the opposition. And this came about, well, if you watch the debate, he'll tell you this story. This came about because on Speaker's Corner, you know, in London's Hyde Park, he used to go and stand on his step ladder, because he's quite a short fellow, and he took his own step ladder and hold forth about why Christianity is right and Islam is wrong. And he got a lot of haranguing from the Muslims who love to come and take him down. And that developed into doing a PhD to find out exactly why they were wrong.
What I struggle with is how you can get a PhD, a doctorate in philosophy, in theology. I mean, those things they're incompatible.
Yep.
Yeah,
I mean, there is a big movement of Christian sort of missionaries who have been supported or who are interested in the origins of Islam, and I think there is a lot of interesting academic study and research revealing exactly how different the origins of Islam are from the Islamic traditions about the origins of Islam, which is quite interesting. I've certainly studied it, and I've found it very interesting. But it is being led, or not being led, but these missionaries are really into it. But the core of it is by proper scientists.
Yep, I can fully see studying the origin of any religion, the causes of religions, the effects of religions, the impacts of religions. But theology as a study is, as in the way it's done, So
Yeah.
Well,
I think Richard,
It's like you know, being a fish trying to figure out what water is. You know, like, you know, you can't separate yourself from the milieu that you find yourself, that you're ensconced in, right? There's no objectivity whatsoever.
I think Richard Dawkins said that a PhD in theology was a PhD in nothing. He said, there's a video, you can probably find it, where he says that to a large crowd of people at a university that's right next door to a school of theology.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
a PhD in nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Dawkins doesn't like the theology departments of universities, but my position is that I think Christian theology isn't a discipline. It shouldn't be, you know, a university level discipline, but a theology of all religions, you know, that would be fine. After all, it's given us Francesca Stavrakopoulou, who is a great advocate for atheism because she knows the Bible and loves it so much.
Yeah.
A course in comparative theology might be a course worth taking.
Mm-hmm.
But it's almost more like a history and philosophy, you know,
Exactly.
of the whole thing. So.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
there's also that guy who's a cosmic skeptic. What's his name? Alex something or other.
he's good.
Alex
I love
O'Connor.
Oh, Alex O'Connor. Well, he's doing, or maybe he's done, a degree in theology as an atheist.
Yes.
Which is
Yes,
an interesting idea, but you know, it certainly gives him a great command over the subject.
I can fill in a bit about that because he wanted to do a degree in philosophy and he had to take a subsidiary subject, and the one that seemed to fit the best was theology. So it wasn't his primary choice.
It's also, I think it needs to be said that studying a degree in theology at a university like Oxford or Cambridge, or even any academic university, I do think that's quite a bit different from going to Bible college, for example.
Sure.
Because
Trinity Western University.
Because often a degree in theology at a proper university is more like almost a classical education where you do a lot of philosophy and a little bit of psychology and all of those things. So maybe a degree in theology, it depends on where you take it, but I think a degree in if you have a qualification from a Bible school and call that a degree in theology.
But see, that's still different than getting a PhD in Islam, right? Because theology is a much broader subject than just Islam, you know, because Islam is a subset of the subject of theology.
Yeah, I'd like to see Andy's PhD because I suspect that its title is something like "Why Islam is Wrong." Anyway, I'm going to rattle through because we're coming up towards our deadline here. And there's a lot of, this is a silly season, isn't it? So there's a lot of little short pieces of news, that most of which I think we can approve of. Take this one, for example. You know that Australia's just launched a new parliament. And so they are now arguing over how to open the events, the meetings, because half of them don't want it to be with the Lord's Prayer, and the other half do. So let them work that one out.
It's very interesting that they would have that. They elected a known atheist for president, a woman for. So, I mean, it's not exactly a more hallowed than you nation. I'm surprised to see him debating this.
Yeah, and not to mention the fact that the Lord's Prayer, again, is strictly a Christian thing, and it's not respectful of all the other religions that people have there, or the Aboriginal peoples,
or the non-believers, which are growing,
or the non-believers. Exactly.
Absolutely. So you'd like this. An LGBTQ plus drag queen activist. You know how we like drag queens and their comedy names. This one's called Brighter Filter. And she was applauded with loud cheers and standing ovation when he appeared at the Grace Church School's Pride Chapel in New York City. So, I mean,
Wow.
if I'd been there, I would have been one of those standing and applauding. Meanwhile, Republican lawmaker Glenn Thompson, who reminds me of nothing more than one of the aliens from Doctor Who, attended his gay son's wedding, but he did that only 3 days after opposing a bill that would have affirmed the validity and protection of same-sex marriage. So he's against same-sex marriage in the middle of the week. And then by the weekend, he's celebrating his gay son's wedding. Is that typical hypocrisy?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do. Is it which Republican? But it's an older Republican who was opposed to gay marriage, but then when his daughter, I think, came out as gay, he changed his opinion. So it can happen. That just shows. It just shows that to somebody like that, there really isn't. It's not about what's right or wrong. It's about how many votes I can lose or gain.
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with doing the right thing.
No. Yeah, it's all preaching to their choir. Yeah. Anyway, here's some really good news, because out of the 157,064 people in US federal prisons, how many do you think identify as atheists?
9%.
No, 0.9%.
Yeah.
No, 0.09%.
Almost none.
0.9% according to your notes. So
Yes,
that's amazing.
The
Yes.
thing is, though, keep this in mind. Most of those, well, I don't know about most of them, a large fraction of prison populations in the U.S. are hoping to be able to get out early, you know, to earn the favor of the boards that decide how long do you have to stay and when can we let you out. And they know, I think, that it's not going to help them if they go in and admit that they're atheists. I mean, if I were in prison and I wanted to be out, I would be very quiet about my atheism.
Yeah, you'd want the parole board to be on your side, and they're bound to be Christians.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point, Frank.
It is an interesting point for sure.
I know a humanist chaplain at a prison in the UK, and you know, each sort of chaplain has their own group of people or service, and there is a bit of competition about the quality of the biscuits they hand out. and I think that there are some prisoners who change their religion on a relatively frequent basis in order to get the better quality biscuits.
Well, if I were a prison chaplain, they'd all be eating pasta.
How do they judge the quality of the biscuit? Is it those that are most like Christ's body?
I was going to ask,
they're the ones that have most chocolate on them, I think, probably.
I was going to ask, is it the biscuits that turn into the flesh of Jesus Christ?
Yes, same idea.
Is it the group that has communion and takes wine?
Yes. Wine. That's a good idea. I haven't had any of that today. So the last and very good piece of news is that Kansas has had a referendum, and they voted to protect abortion rights. You know how Roe versus Wade at the federal level has been overturned.
Yeah.
So it's now up to the states to decide their own policies. Well, Kansas has kept effectively the status quo, Roe versus Wade. And this is amazing because there's not many states more conservative than Kansas.
Exactly right. It's very encouraging.
Yeah.
But again, the work isn't done because that bodily autonomy should be enshrined as an amendment to the Constitution.
Yeah,
It should.
absolutely. Yeah.
I would like to say that I heard this news on the David Pakman show. I don't know if any of you follow David Pakman, a young independent news commentator.
Yeah.
And something that is also applicable here is the fact that it proves that America, in my opinion, is not a full democracy, because what happens does not reflect the will of most people. It's what happens at every level. And it also contains this idea that is often flouted, that America was founded on Christian principles. And I think that is something that needs to be addressed more regularly.
We do address it. It's addressed every day, very carefully. If you look at the First Amendment, Google the First Amendment.
I've read it.
I mean, you know, that comes up often in the debate is pretty heavy. But if you listen to the right news programs, they'll never, by right I mean right versus left, politically, they'll never mention the First Amendment. They'll just say, you know, we found it as a Christian nation. But the First Amendment nips that right in the bud.
Well, on the subject of what the majority view might be, one voter, name of Taylor Hirth, wept as she celebrated the result with her 9-year-old daughter, and they were attending a watch party in Overland Park, Kansas. And she said, "I'm a rape survivor, and the thought of my daughter ever becoming pregnant and not being able to do anything about it angers me. I never thought this would happen here, but we've worked so hard to get the vote out. Republicans underestimated us." So it seems that there is a majority feeling for what you might call pro-life, although we don't like those words. Sorry, pro-choice, but we don't like those words. But but they don't vote. So, you know, they get the government they deserve. Okay, guys. Well, thank you very much. You've been wonderful again. And I'm going to now give you a whole week off.
All right. Well, I'm off to fight fires. Well, not physically myself, but wildfire season is here, so I'm off to help protect another community while they are evacuated.
Well,
pretty big fires out here. So.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
I hear they started in London and in California too. Yeah. This is the world we're now in, I'm afraid. The future has come.
And we're facing high temperatures again this coming week.
Well, our grass is yellow, and we haven't had rain for, I don't know, I can't remember, you know, and they've told us that we're going to have 2 more weeks before it rains here.
Well, up in the north, the grass is green, so we haven't had that same problem.
There you go, you see.
But as a visitor, I can say that in Pontefract, it has rained once, and it was during the night. It was a few drops. I haven't had a single drop of English rain on my head since I've been here. And that's not a good thing.
Look, Tersia, keep it quiet. We don't want everybody knowing this, that we have such perfect weather here.
Well, there you go. On that note, say bye-bye.
Bye.
Next time. Thank you for watching. Several clergy
was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the Carry-On drag.
Yeah, that's a good question.